aikin sallama da wannan amanar da na gaya maka ta gidansa da amanar abin gaba kamar su bindiga su kibiya su lufudda to duk ikon sallama ne.
Guns were rare in old Kano, and the king did his best to monopolize them for his royal bodyguard of musketeers. These were housed in the palace itself. Gunpowder is still manufactured in the palace arsenal, but it's only issued today for festivals and celebrations. Control of the bodyguard is vested in the Salama. This parade may be a bit of a joke, but the power once exercised by these appointed officials was real enough. Their task was to safeguard the security of the state. Early Kano had its own religion. Its beliefs involved ancestors, local spirits, and various natural forces. Many of these beliefs centered on a cult which endures to this day, known as Bori. The Bori ritual is extremely old. This form of it, nowadays little more than a popular entertainment, still carries an echo of its old magical persuasion. Over the centuries, as Kano's links with the outside world increased, the spirit cults gradually declined. They gave way to the modernizing influence of a world religion, Islam. Islam came here 1,000 years ago, but its real impact began with the arrival of Muslim traders from Mali around the year 1300. These were the Wangarawa, whose learning and prosperity reinforced the teachings of the Quran. Slowly, Muslim influence widened, until the great majority of the Kano people, led by their king, answered the call of the Prophet. By the middle of the 15th century, the power and wealth of Kano had grown to a point at which a new and enterprising ruler needed to develop more modern forms of government. Mohammed Runfa, one of the most famous kings of the old Harbi dynasty, sent for a North African expert in Muslim law and custom named Al-Magili. Al-Haji Maita Masuli explains.
Sheikh Magili, after having studied and after having become very learned and world famous in Islamic studies, decided to come to this part of the country to establish himself, which he did in Kano. He came during the reign of Muhammad Runfa, a very well-known, very famous, and very scholarly emir of Kano during the Harbi days.
Al-Maghili advised the king to set an example to his people in religious matters, since religion and authority went together. The king enforced the Sharia, the Muslim legal code, and formed a panel of Islamic judges, the Qadis, to preside over the courts. The present Chief Qadi of Kano, Dr. Hassan Gwazo, is an expert on Al-Maghili's teachings.
In fact, he devised two types of courts, that is courts of first instance and also court of appeal. The court of first instance were the courts to be manned by the Qadis, but the court of appeal was that of the Emir himself, that is the Emir in council, that is people aggrieved by the decisions of the Qadis or by the attitude of any official of the Emir, have got a right to go direct to the Emir himself.
In a book called The Obligations of Princes, Al-Maghili set down a number of rules for the king to follow in the affairs of state.
He warned the ruler that he shouldn't content himself with informations brought to him by his officials, because he said because sometimes complaints might be against the officials, and therefore the Emir should be always accessible, and that is why we see in the history of kingship in Kano, from those days to this present time, that the Emir has the practice of coming out, always sitting in a place where everybody can see him, and you can see that this is even done even today.
But if justice was in theory available to everyone, it was also sharply administered. The king and his council had the same power of life and death as their contemporaries in Europe.
He had the power to say if somebody had killed somebody, or the Emir, and together with his legal advisors, would go through the case, and then if that person was absolutely guilty, the Emir would send him to the hanging place. He had his head cut off.
The authority of the king was very great, but like other African kings of that time, including those of Benin and Oyo, he could not be a despot. He administered the law, but he also had to obey it. He ruled his council, but he also had to defer to it. In some ways, African kingdoms were ahead of those in Europe in devising checks and balances to limit the power of the king. Al-Maghili was building on earlier traditions of African political administration when he made rules for the exercise of royal power.
Then later he wrote a constitution. And it was in this constitution that he provided for the establishment of a public complaints commission, Wilayat al-Mudhalim, in Arabic, which literally means public complaints commission, the institution of ombudsman. So you see, about 500 years ago, even more, we had this institution of ombudsman in Hausa land.
But the king remained at the center of all things, especially at the center of spiritual power. For the celebration of a major religious festival, the king still leads the prayers of his people.